everybody, to another CKCA national discussion. This one, sorry, let me just move back to the title screen. This one I think is very relevant and very timely for all of you, how to lead your organization through a challenging macroeconomic environment. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. I'm just going to let somebody else into the room. If we have any technical issues, we will have to reschedule. Fingers crossed that we don't. Remember to unmute when you want to speak. I am recording this session and it will be available on demand, so you will be able to share this with other staff. We have a few people that couldn't make it today, but are really wanted to hear the session. So they've been asking me, is this being recorded? And yes, the answer is always yes to our webinars. And we'll do a Q&A at the end. So my name is Sandra Wood. I'm the Executive Director of the CKCA. Through Zoom and all the other ways that I can meet you, I'm starting to get to know everybody, but still a few new faces today. So it's really nice to meet you, and you have my coordinates. Please reach out to me at any time. We do email out every week to our members with news clippings and updates, and then we just sent out our May-June newsletter. If you're not receiving any emails from us, then we're hitting your spam. So be sure to reach out to me and let me know so that we can take a look and see what's going on, because we push out a lot of the information to you via email. So it's really important we stay connected. So our agenda today is just, we're going to do a welcome from the CKCA. We'll do some introductions. We're going to hear from our sponsor, Bloom. And then we're going to hand it over to our presenter, Yohaan Thommy. And then at the end, as mentioned, we'll do Q&A. I'm very pleased to introduce you to our new board for 2023 and 2024. Many of these members you already know. They are working in the industry. They are manufacturers or they're suppliers to the industry. We just ran our elections in June at our annual meeting and elected one new board member, Chris Havey, who's from CNC Automation. I had to hold myself there because we've just had a new member join called CNC Cabinet, so I have to be careful. So these are board members. Feel free to reach out to any of them at any time as well. Or you can, if you want to reach out to a board member, you can always send me a note and I'll get in touch or connect you to them.
Question, Sandra, was that Pete Fournier?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You know Pete, Don?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Great. Okay. So we're here to help you. CKCA has been around since 1968. We've got lots of programs and services. I think the biggest value that we offer you is that we connect you. I've seen that. I've been working in this association for over 6 years now. And the magic that happens when two manufacturers get together and talk and compare notes is amazing to see. There's so much learning to be had to help you move your businesses forward. And I think that's our biggest strength, is definitely the networking. And we do that through Zoom, through face-to-face events. Obviously, COVID, really kind of affected us in a bad way, but we focused on other things and got on with developing other programs and services. So these are just some of the things that we're doing. We've got a number of events coming up. We're going to be going out east in September for our national forum. And then we've got 2 trade shows this fall. Both of them will be in Toronto. So we'll be at all of these events. So I hope that you'll be able to make it out to some of them and come and meet me or the board of directors. So just before we get into the session, I was just pulling a few stats, and I thought I'd just leave these with you to consider as we go into this session. So StatsCan just recently updated their industry stats for 2021. And while we were sitting at about $3.5 billion in revenue generation in 2020, that number has actually gone up. And these are now numbers that are reflective through the COVID years, if I can call them that. It actually jumped to $4.4 billion in 2021. It's a significant jump compared to the last 3 or 4 years prior to COVID. Inflation rates, they're saying they're likely to, inflation is still, let me correct that. It's not inflation. It's actually interest rates I should have put there are likely to increase in July. This is everything that I'm seeing right now. I don't know what percentage, but inflation is not cooling as fast as they would like to see. They are predicting, the economists that I'm talking to are predicting a modest recession. Not sure when, how, or what that's going to look like. Government wants to bring in about 1.5 million new Canadians by 2025. And our industry, along with the home building industry, is wondering, where are we going to house all these people? And, obviously, so that presents a lot of growth opportunity for our industry. And BDC just recently published a report, which I recommend you read. And I actually pushed it out in our newsletter this morning, the link to the report. You can download it. It's free. But one of the key messages to them was that businesses must adapt to this new environment to ensure they can survive. And there's a lot of information in that report that I think would help you as you plan the future of your business over the next 3 to 5 years. So today I would like to really thank Bloom for sponsoring this session. We rely on our membership dollars and the sponsorships that we get throughout the year to run this association. And we're always extremely grateful to our sponsors who provide that level of support. So Bloom is our sponsor for today. So thank you to Bloom for everything that you do to support us. And today's presenter, and I'll hand this over to Bloom to do the presentation, but many of you may have heard that we had Yohaan speak at our conference in February, and it was so well received. Yohaan and I have remained in touch. And when he mentioned that he had a different presentation, I jumped on the opportunity to have him come and speak to you, because I know that what he's going to present today, you're going to find extremely valuable. So on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Tony Henry to just share a little bit of information with you about Bloom and to introduce our speaker. Over to you, Tony.
Thank you very much, Sandra. So as always, Bloom's a proud sponsor and a contributor to the CKCA. So we're pleased to sponsor this event and offer ongoing support for the organization. A couple of reasons why this event was chosen, and I think one, the title, what is the outlook or the economic outlook for the next 4 to 5 years? Well, it's certainly not as optimistic as maybe it's been in the past. So we are heading for some turbulent times. And, I thought of it a couple of different ways. It's almost 40 years for me in this industry, and 25 of them with Bloom. I've been through a few. Downturns and a few upturns. So, we've been able to weather that storm through Bloom, and I'm looking forward to hear, how Yohaan approaches this, and looking very forward to seeing him. So, from our side, during these times, Bloom will always be there. We'll always be a supporter. We can help all of you with some long-term planning. With our quality products and our innovation, we can certainly help you get through some difficult times. And again, difficult times, they breed opportunity, and some will be slow, and some will be busy, and some will thrive. And those that think strategically and want to strive and get ahead, we can certainly help out and partner with them. And from a Bloom standpoint, we certainly work best with companies that are forward-thinking, strategically thinking, and we can certainly help plan, build, and strategize. So, our products, time-tested, full program. Our service offers scalability and efficiencies. Our innovations can inspire you. Many great ideas. And you have the trust and the security of Bloom, our warranty, our sales staff, our service and support. So, all these things really create, differentiation and, operational efficiencies for those that we partner with. So, during these times, I think we can certainly help out. And I think listening to Yohaan, I think he can also help us all out. And, you know, the other reason I chose to sponsor this presentation is, you know, I had the opportunity of listening to Yohaan in BC at the last national forum, and I was overwhelmed. I thought it was a fantastic message, very well presented, and I look forward to hearing this. And his previous presentation was basically on how to value your business, or what the value of your business is, or how to have optimal value of your business. And sort of a little LOL for me was your business is worth more if you're not there running it yourself. So that was just sort of a little chuckle I had. So the more sustaining your business is, the greater the value of your company is. So that's what I learned from Yohaan, and he's here today. So just a little bit about Yohaan, and then I will leave it up to him. So Yohaan Thommy, he's a partner with MNP, and he leads the firm's performance improvements nationally. So he's working out of the Mississauga office. He focuses on delivering measurable financial results for his clients, helping them make their organizations more valuable while bringing greater financial predictability. Yohaan's services include performance improvement, training on revenue growth and sales, helping with supply chain management, and conducting business process reviews to improve operations. So Yohaan, I will pass it over to you. I look very forward to hearing your take on this subject. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony. That was a very kind introduction. Thank you. Really appreciate that. A few months ago, I was actually helping one of our clients get some cabinets out. They had some people not show up on the line. So I was on the trim line installing some Bloom hardware. So that was a lot of fun. And I can attest the quality and how much fun that was.
How easy it is. There you go.
Well, so it's very nice to meet you all. I work with mainly manufacturing companies, and in my career, I've been able to do some large-scale transformations with about 10 of them. The reason I actually got into this business is I came from a family business where you know, they ran a great shop, and you know, when I think about the intellectual capital in this room, with all of you being leaders in your organizations, it's just fantastic. And I came from an environment like that, but what I learned in my family business is that sometimes when they go through hard times, they don't know where to turn, and they need some practical, pragmatic advice. So growing up, we were allowed to do whatever we wanted to career-wise, just never be a consultant. And you know, here I am. But the reason I got into this trade was actually to make sure I could help businesses that were very similar to my family business, to give them more options when they're going through good times and challenging times that are about to come up. So very quickly, a little bit about M&P. We are the 4th largest firm, accounting, consulting, tax nationally. We're coast to coast, and we exist in very many small towns across Canada. Mario, I don't know where you're based, but you know, we have an office in Red Lake, Ontario, and Thunder Bay, and you know, Kenora, and we're all over the country, coast to coast, in about 120 offices. We have about 8,000 team members. And about a fourth of them are CPAs. I'm not a CPA, and the CPAs do accounting and tax. We have enterprise risk and technology solutions, strategy, human capital, value creation, succession planning. That's kind of where I play. Our corporate finance people. So if you're looking to buy a company, sell your company, we do that work, and I work very closely with that group. Corporate restructuring. I'm sorry to say that over the last little bit, I've actually been working a little bit more with this group, and particularly in this industry, they'll get a call from the bank saying we're pulling our loan from a company, and we go in to essentially help wind the company down or take over the management, and then valuations and litigation support. So I actually got some 2022 data. It's directionally close to the information that Sandra just shared with you. Just talks about what, and this is from IBIS World, which is one of the big benchmarking houses. The Canadian, this industry in Canada is expected to decline by 0.6% over the next 5 years. They first started looking at it from 2021, and primarily because of U.S. exports. Also, and I know this is a challenge in Canada, the imports of low-cost product from China. Net margins were down, so they were from 5.3% in 2016 to 3.6%. Really, actually curious to see what the number comes out for 2023. I anticipate that it's just going to continue going down. And then, this is really interesting where you look at the number of companies in this industry, and the 5 largest only contribute to 15% of the revenue. So essentially, this industry has a lot of players that occupy the remaining 85%. I always like to look at this stat on any industry, and it looks at the revenue per employee. So the revenue per employee in Canada is about 143,000 Canadian, and the revenue per employee for a kitchen manufacturing company in the US. Now, this includes custom kitchens and and I'd say high run cabinet shops as well, is about 243,000. So it's really interesting that the Americans are about 40% more productive than us from a revenue per employee standpoint. I think, based on what I've seen, having clients on both sides of the border, it's access to automation, scale, right? It's easy to scale there. It's a bigger market, and also access to credit. If you look at where the growth's coming from, 2/3 of the growth is from Ontario and Quebec, and then the fastest growing are Ontario and then BC. This is the size of the market. I think, Sandra, you had 4.4 billion. So these are the 2022 numbers. So it shrunk a little bit to about 4.3 billion. This is the profit that it generated. And then you can see that the profit margin did drop by 1.7%. Typical cost structure. I'm not going to go through this in detail. I know you guys will have these slides. I just thought it would be good from a data perspective to share this with you. Wage as a percentage of revenue, purchases as a percentage of revenue, profit margin. You can see what profit margin is done on an aggregate industry-wide basis. And then again, we all know this, that the industry does have high labor costs. It's skilled labor is tough to get in this industry. Purchase costs, there's volatility there. We've all lived through it. I want to go back to my presentation in February for those that weren't here and just give you a little bit of a reminder on how value is created, and then actually compare it and overlay it based on what's happening in the economy today. So take a $10 million business just as an example. I'm just picking that as an example. The example scales up and scales down. This $10 million business makes $1 million in EBITDA. EBITDA stands for earnings before interest, taxation, depreciation, and amortization. So it's a couple of lines on top of your net income. So you take your net income and you essentially add back, any amortization discounts that you've taken and interest payments. So this company right here, when we talk to our corporate finance people and they've shared some numbers with us, they typically are selling for about 4.7 times multiple, right, in Canada. So this number here is not a hypothetical number, but this number is based on what we've seen at the low end of the market in Canada. So if you sell this business, you should be able to get $4.7 million, right? Not, because to Tony's point, these businesses, and I suspect all of you are very involved in your business, they're operator-heavy businesses, which means that you need people like Colin and Mario and Angie and Don to be heavily in the business mostly. And and if those people leave the business, a certain amount of the profitability disappears. I'm not saying this is true for every business, but this is true for your industry. And so they discount part of the EBITDA. So let's just say in my hypothetical example here, they say, 25% of Don's profitability may be impacted because Don's a genius. He knows he has great relationships with his customers. He's able to run the business in a certain way. So instead of getting 1 million times 4.7, Don now gets 750 times 4.7. You take a little bit of a deduction. So Don gets a $3.5 million check, okay, if you were to sell this company. Now, what's the impact today of the economy, right? And I didn't show this slide the last time, but this is what's happened since we last talked, I guess in February. There's increased pressures, rent has gone up, If your rent's coming due, that's going to be impacted. Inflation is kept up. We've had to pay our folks more money. Interest payments have gone up. So take this company right here, that same company that does $10 million in revenue. This is a breakdown of their cost, and I've just provided some estimates here. So their COGS are 50%, SG&A, service general admin, is about 15%, labor costs, other costs. So they're left with 10% to play. Well, what's happened over the last few months is, and what I've seen with my clients' financials, is this picture. So cost increases by 10%. So their COGS goes from 5 million to 5.5 million. Okay. And it's been very hard because their suppliers have pushed costs down to them, just as you've pushed costs down to your customers. And this has been warranted because, the supply chain is still not recovered fully. And there's a ton of inflation. SG&A costs have gone up. I was looking at the average cost of even just something as simple as, flying to get to a conference, right? Flight costs have gone up pretty significantly. It's gone up way more than wage inflation cost. Labor cost, let's just assume in this example, it has stayed steady, hasn't changed. And other costs like commissions or other things have stayed steady and has not changed, which is a conservative assumption. So this company that was making $1 million last year is now going to make $350,000. Okay, and that's the impact that this economy is having on a lot of businesses. So the EBITDA has gone from 10% to 3.5%. Now let's look at this. Let's overlay this on the example of the last slide. $350,000 of the EBITDA times 4.7. You minus the goodwill factor of a 25%. You take a 25% discount, and the same company that you were going to get a $3.5 million check for, you're now getting a $470,000 check for. Now you may say, Yohaan, why are you talking about selling my company? And I'm not interested in selling my company. You're right, but this is the value of the company. So when your financial lender is looking at the value of your company and what they're lending you versus what your company's worth, well, think about this in terms of your house. If the value of your house has essentially gone from $3.5 million to $470,000, and you're borrowing against it, they're going to want to call you up and renegotiate your loan. Right? They're going to want to call you up and ask for a capital call. So I wanted to do this presentation, and thank you very much to Bloom for sponsoring it, for Sandra for giving me this platform, because I come from a small business. I get to help so many of you, and this is very, very hard. I want to be able for you guys to be able to understand how your financial lenders look at this, and then sidestep and mitigate this, and hopefully catch the current and actually turn this into an opportunity for your business. So here's what happens on the flip side, okay? If we're actually able, same $10 million business, and we're able to grow that $10 million business by 20%, okay? We all have backlogs and funnels. If we're able to actually process that and do it in a way through productivity improvement, here's what happens, okay? It's a very different picture. So you grow from 10 million to $12 million. Your COGS stays the same. So it was 50% before, and these are cost of goods sold. It was 50% before, it's now 50%. So it was 5 million, now jumps to 6, which is proportional increase. Your SG&A and overhead essentially do the same. You grow by $2 million, you grow by 20% with the same amount of admin and overhead costs, which is hard to do, but it's not impossible. And then you grow with the same amount of labor costs. So you essentially increase your labor productivity by 20%. Your other costs go up proportionally. It was 10%, it is 10% now. Here's the magic. Your EBITDA jumps from 1 million to 1.8 million. So a 20% increase in revenue leads to an 80% increase in essentially EBITDA. And here's what happens to the value of your company is your EBITDA increases, and you actually achieve this by moving some of that goodwill, that special sauce that some of you as owner operators, very talented individuals know how to do. If you're able to systemize that, move it to the organization, your multiple starts to go up. And then 6.7 is actually about the average multiple that we're seeing for really well-run companies of a certain size. And here's what's happening to the value of your company. Jumps from 3.5 million to 12 million. Now, this is just math, folks, right? This is just hypothetical math, but I thought I'd put all three scenarios in front of you for you to see how your lenders are looking at the business. Because what I'm seeing in this industry is there conversations aren't being had with lenders, and the lenders are looking at things a certain way. and the business owners maybe aren't underpriced about how they're looking at it. I want you guys to understand this, because then this makes a big impact. If you understand this for your business, having better discussions with your lenders on future growth plans, on capitalizing certain projects that you want to do, and also about thinking about, increasing the size, increasing the value and the check that you're going to get at the end of your career for the great organizations that you've built. Some data here, and this is going to be shared with you on industry valuation metrics. These are some lows and some highs. The dark blue here is our public companies. The light blues are privates. Anyone want to take a guess as to why the public companies generally are getting more money than the privates? No? Okay, well, I'll save that for a question that I get to ask myself at the end, okay? But I want you to think about that. That's the answer to that question is a very interesting question, very interesting thing for you guys to think about. And then wanted to take you through this. It's called the rule of 30. So every industry has a rule, and generally technology companies, it's rule of 50. More commoditized businesses. So if you're just producing laminate countertops and it's just out and it's not custom, it's rule of 15, right? So all those manufacturers in China, let's just say, that are flooding the market with very kind of square product, that's rule of 15. I would say if you're a custom cabinet shop, you're following the rule of 30. What is the rule of 30? The rule of 30, and you can Google this. This is not something that I've invented, but the rule of 30 essentially is a principle that the company's combined growth rate plus the profit margin, if it exceeds 30%, the company is a very good buy and it's a strong company. So for instance, I'm going to take Tony, and let's just say Tony runs Tony Cabinet Shop, and Tony basically produces 25% of EBITDA, which is industry leading. It's very, very high. It would be very high in this industry. But Tony basically hasn't invested in the right ERP, he hasn't invested in the right processes, the right training. And Tony essentially is not going to grow, or if he's going to grow, he's going to grow by 2 or 3% a year, right? Because he just hasn't invested in that growth. But Yohaan isn't as successful as Tony, right? And Yohaan's EBITDA is 15%, but Yohaan's put in the right tools and structure in his business so that he can grow year on year by 20%, and he has. So Yohaan, is making 15% EBITDA, and he's growing by 20% a year. 15 plus 20, that's 35. Yohaan's company is seen as a better investment than Tony's company, because Tony's company may have a lot of what I call investment debt or technology debt, where anyone buying that company is to invest heavily in better machinery, right? So in your industry, if you think about this is when you go and buy a state-of-the-art ERP system or a state-of-the-art CNC or Rover, that or Dowling machine that is the best. It gives you a ton more capacity that you can grow into. So pivoting a little bit and talking about, well, what's changed? What's happening today? Well, with inflation, having hit its 40-year highs in Canada, consumer sentiment is really at all-time lows. I saw some reprieve yesterday with inflation slowing down to, I think it was 3.4%, but that also includes the price of gas, which went down by 18%. And so many observers are now viewing a recession is when, not if. We might even be in one, I don't know. But the future is not set in stone. And businesses that plan well and develop options, they typically move from surviving to thriving, because there are opportunities in these hard economic times. Because relatively speaking, your industry is taking a little bit of a beating, but there still are great opportunities in your industry if you just know where to look. And I'm hoping to actually share with you where some of those opportunities are today, and looking to learn from you as many of you have actually found opportunities that I haven't come across or even thought of. So the goal here is to better prepare you and then help you address challenges and seize those opportunities in this challenging economic environment. So what's happening? What's happening with this downturn? Well, there's lower spending. So lower spending leads to lower overall revenues. I went downstairs to get a sandwich at my office the other day, and I was talking with one of my colleagues about this presentation. I said, here's what I'm talking about. And the gentleman on the other end of the sandwich shop, the owner, said, can you please shut up? And I said, what am I doing something wrong? He says, stop using the word recession, because the more you use the word recession, less of your colleagues are going to come down and buy sandwiches from you, right? And I said, you know what, that's a great example. I'm going to use it in my presentation, and I will shut up. But I think that's what's happening. It's a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy as well. Businesses are being very careful about non-discretionary spends, and I think what's happening is we're also seeing slower payments. So there is a cash crunch. And so what's interesting is you need more cash, because now you need more cash to operate your business, and maybe your suppliers are asking you for cash faster, your customers are paying you slower. So you need to be watchful on receivables. One of the things that I would say to you is just very, very simple report that I would implement in my business is, how much did I ship today? How much did I collect today? And how much did I pay out today? Very simple report, right? All of you should be looking at it, right? And getting your CFOs to look at it. So how much should I ship today in dollars? How much should I get paid? How much am I going to pay out? And then once you have the day, actually projecting what it's going to look like over the next 5 days. Inflation obviously erodes margin. If you think about that company that made 10%, and inflation being 3.5–4%, with purchases being a big part of the component of your revenues over here, as soon as inflation gets to 6–7%, it's essentially wiping out about half your margin, right? And that's of a healthy companies. And then there's interest rates. Oh my goodness, I think we're all dealing with the interest rate challenges, whether it's us as business owners or homeowners. The cost of debt is increasing, and it's making people a little bit more gun shy as well in terms of taking on more debt or doing things that are riskier. As a result, banks, being the largest accounting firm that has the most amount of clients in Canada, we're seeing this. We're getting calls from our clients' banks saying, hey, just to warn you, we're going to be cutting the line, and we're going to be asking for a check to be written in because the debt servicing is off, right? The EBITDA is down. The company may have shrunk, and we're not going to give you more. We're actually going to give you less, and we're going to ask you for more. So, financing becomes something that you absolutely need to think about. And I would say have those open conversations with your banker, and then also have conversations with your finance department. If you don't have a finance department, give someone like us a call. We could take a look at it, at least give you some advice in terms of, here's some useful things you can say to your bank. And then there's economic uncertainty, and that goes to the conversation I had at the sandwich shop, right? It's a little bit of that self-fulfilling prophecy. I may have had slower payments, I may have higher interest rates, and then I stop buying, and then that kind of perpetuates. So where do we go from here? What do we do? And I want to give this to you in a financial example, and all of this, you don't have to take notes. All of this will be shared with you. Take, for instance, a business that made $14 million, $14.6 million. If you look at price per square foot, I got these numbers from Colliers, and it's GTA rent. Okay, so the Maxville numbers, I suspect, and the Northern Ontario numbers would be directionally increased or directionally accurate from a percentage increase, but may not be necessarily these numbers. And Colliers said that, hey, on average, industrial space in the GTA per month, and 2021 was about $11.73 a square foot. And if that's the case, the rent expense on this hypothetical business that had 100,000 square feet would have been about nearly $1.2 million in rent expense. Other expenses like labor, materials, overhead is 1.2 million. So this business would have made $1.3 million of EBITDA. Let's just say that this business went and bought some state-of-the-art equipment. The amortization cost would have been another $1 million. So the net profit before tax and interest would have been about $307,000. Okay. Here's what's happened 2 years later. You take the same business, nothing has changed. This business actually did the same amount in revenue. The rent, as per Colliers in 2023, went from $11.73 to $18.01. Okay, that's very specific. And essentially what's happened is rent expense has gone up from nearly 1.2 million to a little bit over 1.8 million. So EBITDA has dropped from 1.3 million to 679. Now you still gotta depreciate and amortize that cost of that new that new CNC machine that you bought, and that new dowler that you bought, or the new edge bander that you bought. That's still costing you $1 million. Well, look at your net profit after tax now. It's negative, right? One positive thing is you don't need a tax accountant because you're not going to pay any tax because you're making zero, right? But you have a problem here, right? And that problem is that with this just rent, the company is seeing a 48% decrease in EBITDA. So what's happening here is I have a few clients in this space. Their EBITDA is actually better than what it was a couple of years ago. They've done really well for themselves, and they're looking to sell the company. But any future buyer that's coming in to buy the company is saying, "Whoa, hang on a second. We have to normalize the rent expense." And say, "What do you mean? Where the rent was $1 million? And they said, "Yes, but who owns the building?" "Well, I own the building." "Well, I'm charging myself market rent." "You're charging yourself market rent from 3 or 4 years ago. Today, market rent has, let's just say, doubled. So if your EBITDA was $1 million, $1.3 million, it's market rent is $1 million more. So really, your EBITDA is only $300,000. We're going to pay you based on that multiple, right?" And that's really frustrating for you as business owners to hear, because that's not what you're seeing. You're not normalizing down that expense. But that's what's happening when these companies are being looked at by their banks, and their banks are getting nervous about this and saying, "Your real estate company is doing well, but your operating company is actually making less money today." It's not really, but it is. That's how we're going to look at it. I want to pause here and just ask if there's any questions on this slide, because this is important.
And just a reminder to everybody to, if you have a question, to unmute, especially if you don't have your camera on.
Here's what's happening to interest rates. So same company, it's doing the same. The interest rates, let's just say this company was borrowing $2 million a year, and the interest rate was about 3.25, and they were only paying back the interest. They weren't paying any principal. If you just take the straight math, they would have paid about $65,000 in interest expense. And so their net profit after tax would drop from 307 to really about 242, because you've got to include that interest expense. Now you go to 2023, and remember this company now is making less because their rent went up. So they're making 679. Well, they're now borrowing at 6.95, right, in terms of borrowing rate. And if they just pay their interest, they're paying now, instead of paying $65,000, they're paying $139,000. Their net profit after tax was 320. Remember how I said you didn't need a tax accountant? Now you really don't need a tax accountant, because it's now dropped to minus 459. So the interest expense has increased. For all of you, it'll be different, but about 100%, right? That's or more in some cases, from 2021 to 2023. So I don't want to be all grim here, okay? But what's the future? Well, number one, I think take stock. Run what's called a scenario plan on your business. And a scenario plan on your business is you're saying to yourself, these are my costs that are going to go up, right? This is how my interest is going to go up, much like that example that I did. And you're saying, what do I need to do to mitigate against that? What are some things that I need to do to manage this? Maybe this is like cod liver oil and I just have to swallow it and focus on staying here for a few years. Or can I fight against it and look for other opportunities in my business? Number two, develop your strategies. Figure out what those strategies are. If you're struggling to develop these strategies, hey, give me a call. I'd be happy to spend 30 minutes with you and just chat with you about it. And you can kind of, vacuum clean my brain. Be happy to do that as being a member of the CKCA. But, the one thing I will warn you against is, please, and I speak from personal experience, don't do what every business owner does. And sometimes I do in my own business, which I put my head down and I get so involved in solving the complexity that I don't put my head up and look at the hurdle that's going to come and hit me 6 months from now. So please develop your strategies. And next, think about what your proactive options are. Are there some opportunities for you to cut costs in the business? Are there some, would you need to now grow? Maybe you've been at 5 million for a long time and you're comfortable at that. You make money at that. Well, with your overhead costs going up, you may now need to grow to 6 million. That may be the new place that you want to sit at, right? So developing what those proactive options are, and then using math and scenario planning to figure out, what do I need to do? How does interest rate going up by another 0.5% potentially, right, 6 months from now, how does that impact me? And I think part of this is just good, resilient planning. I think we all know this quote, by failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail. But can we commit to even taking 30 minutes as business owners, blocking it off in our calendars, and thinking about the risk to our profit and loss, the risk to our financing and how our bank looks at this, and coming up with proactive strategies on this. So what are some things that you can do? Number one, business is not complicated. You buy low, you sell it for more profit, and you hire the right people, right? So focus on margin. Can you look at if there's opportunities to bring some of your costs under control? Is there inventory leakage? Is there rework happening? Are your doors getting dinged? Are you ordering wrong? Look at your purchasing department. Are there opportunities maybe to standardize the glass sizes that you put on your door, or buy standardized hardware from Bloom instead of buying 4 different sizes, because you have to train people how to install 4 different sizes on your cabinets and essentially have a ton of inventory. Can you lower your operational expenditure? One of the things we've looked at is at MNPs we've said, hey, there's certain things where we don't need to fly to. We can do them remotely with clients. We are going to spend on flights and flying, but let's be more. It's just good business. Let's just look at this and be just more intentional with it. And then, when I say margin, I purposely didn't say cost cutting, because I think margin can be had by sometimes growing the top line. And in this business, you do have a lot of overhead because it is capital intensive. You have paid for machinery. What you're going to have to do is also look at growing. And maybe you have to grow by 5% or 10%. But if you can grow and then grow in such a way that you can grow with the same amount of space, the same amount of people, and maybe it's only 5%, a big part of that 5% now goes down to your bottom line, right? Like the example that I showed you with the charts. The next thing is improving operational efficiency. And I actually have some examples of things that I want to take you through. So I'm going to fly through this slide. I have some practical things that I want to take you through. The third thing, this is important. I want to spend some time here. Enhancing cash flow. Your business is going to require more cash to operate. Things are going to slow down in terms of payments if you haven't seen it already. So just very, very, very simple. It's coming up with, like, if you need a daily and a weekly cash flow report, and you need at the bare minimum, and you need to also look at it, not you need to look at cash flow on a 13-week basis, right? So looking at your 13-week cash flow. If you don't have a 13-week cash flow, I'd be happy to share one with you with my compliments, and I can send it to you. And so, just ping me through Sandra, and I'd be happy to get it to you. So looking ahead, this is not all doom and gloom. There are opportunities. Number one, if you can figure out, there are some businesses, and we've all read about them. The market is shrinking a little bit in terms of the number of businesses in this space. They're finding it difficult to stay in business. But we all know that from the demand side, it's going to grow. I don't know what's going to happen to these 1.5 million residents, where they're going to live. They're going to need kitchens. And I think that the market size, I believe, over the next 5-10 years is going to grow. So we just have to survive this storm. There are going to be opportunities to go out and acquire underperforming businesses, right? And get some synergies through underperforming, through merging it into your operation. I have a client that's about $3 million in revenue, and the overheads are so high. And I said to them, look, like, you can cost cut, but let's scenario plan it. Even with your cost cutting, you won't be able to generate the kind of money that you need to live. You have to think about M&A, or you have to think about organically growing your business, but you have to get it from 3 million to 5 million, because that's just the impact of the other costs that have gone up in your business. So, a business like that, for instance, may be more willing to talk about taking a check for their business and calling it in a day, right? So there are M&A opportunities. The next thing is, if you're looking at selling, staging your business for selling. And part of that may be, we're all homeowners, and if you live in a home that's of a certain value, you are going to get more value for it if you stage it for sale. If you get a little bit more EBITDA for a year or 2 years before you sell it. Think about what it looks like for staging your business. I'm happy to talk to you about that. That's primarily what I've been doing, mostly in kitchen in the kitchen cabinet industry, at least prior to this economic downturn. And then there's market share opportunities. There are companies, unfortunately, that are running into financial issues. You can run a quick Google search and see who those companies are. But I think that this is an opportunity to expand market share. So let's talk about how to actually practical things to go and get more productivity and get more efficiency in your business and increase margin. Number one, if you're building a house, that house, if you don't have a blueprint when you're building that house, how many more mistakes are you going to make when you eventually build a house? Because if you don't know where what is and you're just kind of eyeballing it. Well, a lot of businesses run without what I would call that business blueprint or the business process design. It is so important to have this mapped out in your business to figure out how does your business work? Because even eventually when you transition your business to the next gen or sell it, or maybe you're going to be more focused on some strategic things in your business as a result of this presentation, you have to download some of the other things to someone else. You have to document how your business works. If you guys haven't read this book, Good to Great, a lot of this methodology here comes from that book. It's a great book to read. And really, what does that look like in the kitchen industry? So this is actually an example mapping session of something that I did. I looked at, okay, how do you plan, how do you execute, and how do you forecast? And with this specific client, the box colors, green means that's something that they have, so they had a budget and forecast. Yellow means that they had something, but it didn't really work properly. It's the 13-week cash flow. They didn't really sales forecast. They didn't plan for resources. It didn't connect well because they were so custom. And they said, we're not going to invest in a big ERP system. We don't have the money for that. So, we're just going to do it all on Excel. Okay, that's great. We can do it on Excel, but show me how you're doing it. Does it have some logic and some math behind it? And as a result, they didn't have a good production schedule, and they were losing efficiency over here as things went down to the shop floor to execute. So one of the things that we actually built for them, and they were band-aiding things. And as a result of the band-aiding, they were losing information in their business. Does this sound familiar to your businesses? I think the kitchen industry is, kitchen manufacturing to me is one of the hardest manufacturing businesses you can own. It is really difficult. So much is changing. So unlike an automotive plant that's making one gearbox for one car and you're making 1 million of them, it's a lot harder to do this, but it doesn't take away the value from doing this. So how do you actually drive capacity constraints? Well, how do you actually, drive that additional efficiency? Theory constraints is something that is probably the number one thing that I look at when I go into a kitchen manufacturing company. And really, it's really breaking down. And I actually picked one over here from the window industry, okay, because I didn't have room for 21 work centers because you guys have a lot of work centers, okay? So I went with a more simplified example. So in the window industry, you cut frames, you cut sashes, you cut the accessories, you hole punch, you weld frames, you do some corner cleaning, you install the glass, and then it's out, corner shipping. Now, here's what's happening. This shows you, based on the equipment for this, and this is a real company, the amount of actual windows that can be produced an hour. So we can cut about 126 windows an hour, but we can only install glass for 9 windows an hour. And most businesses don't know these numbers. They know it maybe anecdotally. And when you plug in a production schedule of many windows, many kitchens, it all gets mushed up. So one of the things we actually did is we built a tool that we're able to kind of go into a business and actually ingest their schedule and actually tell them where they're over capacity, where they're under. So here's what's happening. The cutting frames, so what if you cut 30 windows an hour? You're wasting, the plant can only process 9. So you're creating more inventory, you're paying for that inventory, and you're losing all of this capacity because the person in this work center is essentially going slow. Why would they go fast? Because they're just producing more inventory. And so if you can actually understand where the constraint is in your business and then manage to that constraint, the hard thing in the kitchen industry is the constraint moves every hour, depending on product mix, depending on the day, it moves every hour. So you need a production schedule that's able to actually predict that. So we've actually built I'm going to skip this, I'm going to skip this video here. Actually, you know what? I'm going to show it. So this is a Chevy, sorry, this is a Visa ad. It's not a Chevy ad. It's a video, it's a Visa ad. But check this out. Essentially, it's everyone paying by cash, and then one person decides to do something a little bit different. It clogs the whole line. This is what I see happening at my clients' plants. So, that very simple example is that's sort of what's happening in all of our plants, except when you run a custom kitchen business, it can't be standardized. You can't necessarily be like that restaurant with everything kind of, working on a very specialization way. But because it's also custom, it also causes a challenge. So this is actually a tool that we developed where we can actually take your master routings, we ingest it into our tool, and then it actually shoots out a schedule. And then what we actually do with that schedule is we actually go and predict where the lost time in the business is. This is an example of actually a very successful kitchen manufacturing shop. And we looked at the value added versus non-value added. So if you're saying, Yohaan, there's no way I can get a 20% productivity increase. You don't understand, everyone's working really hard. Well, this is a really good business where, in an 8-hour day, an average employee is losing about 60% of the time. Why? Well, because they're doing some rework. There's a process that's imbalanced. They're idle for a little bit of it, maybe like less than 10%. There's a layout issue. They're walking up and down. So doing a productivity study in your business to understand as part of your scenario plan, highly, highly valuable. I highly encourage it. Next, doing daily and intraday reporting, understanding your key bottleneck work centers. How much are they actually producing on an hourly basis? Because you win and lose on an hourly basis. And I'm running out of time here, and I'm going to kind of skip through this. The other thing is giving your supervisors a checklist. So saying, hey, these are the 10 things that have to happen operationally that are really important. The important things, not the urgent things. And I want you to do these 10 things. So we spend a lot of time training supervisors. If you have supervisors that are interested in, or you're interested in signing them up for a supervisory program, would happy to help. And there's grants that you can actually take advantage of that the government gives you on this training. So with that, I'm about 2 minutes into my end here, and I'm just gonna get to the Q&A slide. One of the things I'd like to offer you is we have a manufacturing operational health check. So if you pull out your phones and you kind of QR code that, it'll take you to our website. It's all confidential, and it asks you for qualitative information. I'm not going to ask you about revenues or financials or anything. Get a couple of people in your organization to take it, and it'll tell me whether you have some of the tools or not that will enable your success. And then I also have a video of a client of ours that we've done some work for, one of the many clients who we've done work for that have agreed to be provide us with a testimonial, and it's on our website. But I'll stop right here and open it up for questions.
Thanks, Yohaan. Just a reminder again, folks, if you've got questions, unmute so Yohaan can hear you. I didn't get any in the chat room either. Yohaan?
Okay, no problem.
I think some excellent information. I think people are just digesting what you've said, feeding from the fire hose. Is that what they say?
I think so. I asked a question at the beginning, and I asked about the two different bar charts, right? I said, why do public companies get better multiples than private? Well, one of the reasons is what Tony talked about in the beginning, where generally public companies have done some risk mitigation, they have their processes documented, and they don't necessarily have geniuses in the business that are holding the business up. And in many cases in the cabinet industry, there are those 2 or 3 geniuses that you can't afford to lose. God forbid they win the lottery or get hit by a bus. and that doesn't exist on the public side. And or it exists, but to a much less degree. And generally, if that's the case, they get better valuations for their company. Public companies also have tools and systems and to manage their revenues and their risk, and they're doing scenario planning. So, if the market views them as being less of a risk proposition, I asked you to think about that and think about how to think of yourself as and this asset, and how to protect this asset that is your business, and plan for the future. So one of the things that I'm seeing is a lot. I'm a business owner as well, and one of the mistakes that I commonly make is I'm very focused on my profit and loss statement every month, on my cash flow. I don't think about my balance sheet. I'm not thinking about the future. I'm not running a scenario plan to say, what happens if interest rate goes up? How does that impact my business? What happens if the price of real estate goes up? How does that impact my business model? Think through that. Even if you own your real estate, think through that.
Anybody have any questions or comments?
I think I have to rewatch that video a couple of times.
Oh, Mario, yeah, for sure.
I agree.
Mario, where in Northern Ontario are you?
Between Norby and Timmins, New Liskeard.
Okay, nice. My wife is from Red Lake, so
Like, oh, it's far.
yeah, very far, yeah.
Got somebody around here, like Sudbury, Timmins, Norby?
We do have our accounting practice there in Timmins and Sudbury and North Bay. We don't have any consulting people that do this specific work there, but we do have them on the West Coast. We do have them in Quebec and in Ontario.
Where's the closest? Toronto for me, or?
Yeah, that would be, yeah, it would be Toronto. Yeah.
I think
Okay.
one of the questions that I have, in all of this, as you watch all this, everything that's going on, is the fact that, we have a government that is telling us we need to build more homes, we have to increase production, and their plan, their intent, they need to bring in more people into this country for, all the reasons that we already know about. And so, in spite of this economic climate situation, you've got this other thing happening that a lot of people are sitting going, how's that going to fit into all of this? How are we going to build more homes? How do we increase production? But yet, you've got all these other economic forces that are kind of pushing against a little bit. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Yohaan?
I think, and this is my opinion, I think that 5 years from now is going to be the start of the glory years in this industry, because there's going to be new homes built. You can't build a new home without a kitchen, right? What you guys do is so essential, and I think a lot of businesses are going to go out of business, unfortunately, through this. Margins are tight in this industry. It's a very difficult industry to operate in. And what it's going to do is it's going to give you a lot of leverage over the home builders, because right now what I see is the home builders are dictating to you and moving dates around, and I hate to say it, but disorganized, right? And that disorganization is making you lose margin. Well, I think that your capacity and the capacity that you have is going to be highly valued by them, and you can start charging what you want to charge them. I'm seeing this happen actually in the architectural millwork industry that's selling into some very niche markets where the hospitality industry in certain places is growing and is doing really well, especially high-end hospitality. So they need architectural millwork, custom. They're essentially willing to pay whatever it takes. And the margins some of those folks are making are the best margins they've ever made. I think we're about 3 to 4, maybe 5 years away from seeing that in the kitchen industry. I think part of this is just surviving. Would I get into the kitchen industry today? Personally, if I'm in it, I'd want to stay in it for the next 5 years. But would I get into it today? No. Would I get into it 3 years from now? Yes, because I see a huge opportunity, right? Starting 3 years from now.
Thank you.
So
Anybody
if I
else?
can just say,
Yeah.
I think if I can summarize, I think the next 2 to 3 years is the importance is to survive so that you can thrive, right? Survive so that you can thrive. You're going to do really well. We're all going to do really well in this industry. We just have to survive the next 2 to 3 years.
One of the questions I have, what I've known, and you're bang right on as far as, this industry has, each company has a small handful of key people that you cannot lose.
Yeah.
And in the Atlantic region, what I see has brought us to that is the trade school in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and PEI have all discontinued or watered the program in cabinet making down so bad.
Yeah.
Even if they're still running it, we're not getting anybody decent coming out of it. So I don't know what it's like in Central Canada and West on educating new employees, but trades right across the whole construction industry in this region has been challenged because of the lack of interest in the trades. Is there anything happening Central and West in Canada that are encouraging people to get into trades?
You want me to, I can answer that.
Yeah, please do.
I think there's pockets. I mean, the construction industry is certainly putting a lot of resources into it. We're involved, CKCA is involved in a local initiative here outside of Ottawa to put on an event. We're working with the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association, the Ottawa chapter of NKBA, Algonquin College. We're collaborating to create an event to raise awareness and to expose youth and their parents to the trades, because there's a huge demand for just the residential building trades in Ottawa. So I think there's pockets happening across the country. I mean, we're certainly seeing a lot of investment with government. One of the things that we've done as an organization is out west, we have set up a pilot program. It's running right now. It's a 7-week kitchen production worker program. And what it does is we're working with an organization called Northwest Skills, and they go out and they basically take newcomers to Canada who will have skills that would fit well into our industry. And they bring them in, they put them through a 7-week training program to help them to set them up to be successful and to get the basics of what kind of job opportunities and what our industry is all about. So that's a pilot project that we're working on right now that's happening. They got 15 students in the program and a wait list. So our hope is that we can build that out into something we can have across the country. So it is happening, not on the scale. To be honest with you, we should have been working on this, all industries, 10 years ago.
Right. So the problem is the same right across the country as far as skilled workers go.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. I'm hearing some people are not having an issue right now. Some people are laying off their staff, which they don't want to do because they know how hard it is to get them. They're temporarily laid off. So
I can't get staff. I can't find people.
Yeah. But then you also have you have the cost of living issues on PEI, right? The cost of real estate there I think it's gone through the roof, has it not? So is that just detracting the young?
Yeah, but there's a bit of, yes, that's true. But the cost of real estate has gone up so much because we're running an immigration program, plus domestic migration has been extremely stronger. We're still, even though housing prices have dropped most of the provinces in Canada, we're still increasing. It's not by much, but it's an increase, which we're usually on the lower end of the losing scale. So it's quite a change in the phenomenon in this region. But so we have a lot of immigrants that come in that have money, and they're basically overpaying for pricing, which is what's driving. I think it's artificially inflated temporarily. But the wages have gone up big time here too. So our cost of living was always, relevant to what we were paying. in wages. But yeah, right now we have room to be bringing in migrants, like domestic migrants, and or immigrants, and paying them good wages to, you know, to learn the trade. So, but you just can't find anybody. You go through 100 people that just don't want to do this kind of work.
Yeah, Sandra, there's a government program. I can't remember the name of it, but the government's actually now created something where you can go in and get tradespeople, right? It doesn't follow the conventional point system, which kind of requires you to be a PhD or a master's or whatever. Where you can go in and get in a tradesperson where there is a trade shortage. So I know that a couple of my clients have used this program. I can't remember the life of it, the name of it for the life of me. But a client of mine just went and got, they're in the screw compressor business. So the compressor that's in your plant, and they actually went and bought a compressor mechanic from another country. So I say that's one. I think the other thing that I have a client doing is they said, hey, we've struggled with productivity. So they actually hired me to go in and figure out, how do we save time in the plant? Not to lay people off, but actually to figure out how to save time to have them essentially be more productive. We did that, and then they still grew. And then they said, you know what, we still can't go and get people. We need these many people. And so what they did is they said, we have to grow, because when we grow, we will then be able to capitalize and maybe automate some of the things in the plant. Not because they want to lay people off, but that's what they want to do. And I think the challenge in this industry, if I compare this industry to, let's just say, automotive for a minute, in automotive, it's because you get one order or two orders of a part and you got to produce thousands of them. It's easier to justify the spend on automation. And we all saw that the 3,000 companies in this industry all own that remaining 85% of the market share. So most kitchen companies are smaller in Canada. So it's harder to go and spend money on that automation and capital. And I think this is where, over the next 3 to 4 years, the companies that are larger or do have the ability to spend on this equipment, they are at an advantage over the companies that cannot.
Very true. And just a point on that is that the cost for automation may not be as high as you think. I was speaking with Luke Elias, who's has a very advanced shop outside of Ottawa. He's basically automated every part of his plant. He's working on the final piece now. And he was at a robotics show down in the States a couple of months ago. And he said he was astounded to see how much the costs have come down on a lot of the robotics and automating systems that, that you need. So don't assume that it's all going to be super expensive, because the more they're building, the cheaper it does become. So I thought that was a good piece of news, but it is still a significant expense. There's no question to that. And actually, on that note, just as I may plug for the CKCA, but we are working on a webinar series on technology and automation adoption in the industry, and to take you from A to Z through the process, from setting up that digital strategy all the way through to buying the equipment and running it and getting the metrics out of it that you need, and evaluating it at the end. So we're working on that, and we're actually working with Yohaan as well, to sort of integrate some of the expertise that MNP has around this, because MNP is also one of the authorized vendors who manage the CDAP, the Canadian Digital Adoption Program. So there'll be more on that coming out soon. Okay.
Good. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions anybody has at this point? Tony, any last comments from Bloom, our sponsor?
No, just thank you very much, Yohaan, for the information once again. Sandra, for putting the webinar on, and look forward to the next one.